Elena Voss had not set foot in the Blackthorn Kingdom in 5 years, and she had promised herself she never would again. But an invitation from the Alpha Council could not be refused, not even by her, and certainly not when it carried the seal of the kingdom that had once thrown her away like something used and forgotten. She stood at the edge of the border checkpoint, her daughter's small hand tucked into hers, and looked at the towering black gates that led into the territory of the man who had once been everything to her. 5 years ago, she had walked out of those gates with nothing but a broken heart and a secret growing inside her. Now she walked back in with a pack of her own, a title of her own, and a 4-year-old girl who did not yet know the weight of the blood running through her veins. "Mama, why is everyone looking at us?" Aria asked, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "Because we're important, sweetheart," Elena said, keeping her voice light. "Stay close to me." The guards at the gate straightened when they saw her. They had heard the rumors, of course. Everyone had. The rejected mate of Alpha King, Damien Cross, had built her own pack from nothing, Ashwood, a territory made up of Omegas no one wanted, and wolves who had been cast aside by other packs. In 5 years, Ashwood had grown from a handful of desperate souls into one of the most respected packs in the region. Elena Voss was no longer a name spoken with pity. It was spoken with respect, and in some circles, with fear. Inside the summit hall, the air was thick with tension. Alphas from every corner of the region had gathered to discuss a growing threat along the northern borders, where rogue wolves had been attacking trade routes. It was supposed to be a simple political meeting. Elena had expected to sit through hours of arguing and posturing, say her piece, and leave before nightfall. She had not expected to see him. Damien Cross sat at the head of the long table, his crown resting heavy on his brow, his face carved from the same stone it had always been. Beside him sat Sophia, his royal Luna, elegant and composed, her fingers laced together like she had rehearsed the pose 1,000 times. Elena felt the old ache rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had buried that pain a long time ago, and she was not about to dig it back up in front of an audience. She took her seat among the other alphas, her spine straight, her expression unreadable. Damien's eyes found hers across the table, and for a moment, something flickered there. Surprise, maybe, or something older and harder to name. She held his gaze without flinching, and then looked away first, on purpose, so he would know it meant nothing to her. The meeting dragged on. Reports were read. Maps were unrolled. Voices rose and fell. Elena answered when asked, and stayed silent otherwise, counting the minutes until she could leave. That was when the doors at the back of the hall creaked open. A small voice called out, "Mama?" Every head turned. Aria stood in the doorway, having slipped away from the nursemaid Elena had left her with, her golden eyes wide and searching the crowded room for her mother's face. She had Elena's dark hair, but everything else about her, the shape of her jaw, the sharp arch of her brow, the exact tilt of her chin when she was determined to get her way, belonged to someone else entirely. The hall went quiet. Damien rose halfway out of his seat before he seemed to catch himself. His hands gripped the edge of the table. He looked at the little girl standing in the doorway, and the color drained slowly from his face. No one needed to say anything. The resemblance spoke loudly enough on its own. Elena stood quickly and crossed the room, scooping Aria into her arms. "I'm sorry," she said to the gathered alphas, her voice steady despite the storm rising inside her. "This meeting isn't over, but I think we all need a moment." She did not wait for permission. She carried her daughter out of the hall, aware of every eye following her, aware most of all of the one pair of eyes that had not looked away. Sophia sat very still at the table, her composed expression cracking at the edges like old paint. She had spent 5 years building a marriage on the foundation of duty and ambition, telling herself that love was a luxury neither she nor Damien could afford. She had never seen Damien look at her the way he had just looked at that child. She said nothing, but her mind was already turning, already calculating what this meant for her position, her crown, her carefully constructed life. That evening, Damien found Elena in the private courtyard where she was waiting with Aria, who was now sound asleep against her mother's shoulder. "Is she mine?" he asked, his voice low and rough, stripped of all its royal polish. Elena did not answer right away. She let him stand there, let him feel the same silence he had once left her in, when he rejected her in front of his entire court. It seemed only fair. "Elena," he said again. Please. Her name is Aria, Elena said finally. She's 4. She likes drawing horses, and she hates peas, and she asks a lot of questions I don't always know how to answer. She paused. Yes, Damien. She's yours. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, the powerful Alpha King looked like nothing more than a man who had just realized how much he had lost. Why didn't you tell me? Because you didn't want me, Elena said simply. You made that very clear, in front of everyone who mattered to you. I wasn't going to hand you a daughter to reject too. The words landed like a blow, and Damien had no defense against them because they were true. He had chosen the crown. He had chosen the alliance with Sophia's kingdom, the peace it promised, the political advantage it secured. He had told himself it was the right choice for his people. He had never once let himself think about what it cost the woman standing in front of him now. I want to know her, he said. I want to be part of her life. That's not up to me alone anymore, Elena said. But I won't pretend 5 years didn't happen. If you want to be her father, you have to earn that. It doesn't come with the crown. Word of what had happened spread through the kingdom faster than anyone could contain it. By the next morning, Sophia had already summoned her advisors, searching for any law that might protect her position. She found one, an old kingdom statute granting the reigning Luna authority over the recognition of royal heirs. It was a technicality, barely used in a century, but it gave her something to hold on to, and she intended to use it. When she presented it to Damien, her voice was calm, but her eyes were not. If that child is recognized as your heir, it changes everything. The alliance with my kingdom depends on our marriage remaining intact. You know this. She's my daughter, Sophia. And I am your wife, Sophia said, for now. The tension in the kingdom grew, as news of the situation reached beyond its borders. Alphas from neighboring packs began arriving, not out of curiosity, but because many of them owed loyalty to Elena. Over the past 5 years, Ashwood had taken in wolves that other packs had turned away, had traded fairly when others tried to cheat, had kept its word when other packs broke theirs. Elena had built something out of nothing, and now that something stood behind her. Marcus, her second in command, arrived at the kingdom's edge with a small envoy from Ashwood, his jaw tight with the kind of quiet anger that came from watching someone you respected get treated unfairly for far too long. You don't have to fight this battle alone, he told Elena. You never did. I know, she said, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself something close to relief. The final council meeting was called 3 days later. The hall was packed. Alphas, advisors, and members of the royal court, all gathered to hear how the Alpha King intended to resolve a crisis that had become impossible to ignore. Sophia sat rigid at Damien's side. Elena stood near the back with Aria's small hand in hers, refusing to be treated like a matter to be discussed rather than a person in the room. Damien rose to speak, and the hall fell silent. 5 years ago, I made a choice, he said. I rejected my fated mate to secure an alliance I believed my kingdom needed. I told myself it was for my people. The truth is, I was afraid of what it meant to choose love over duty, so I chose duty and called it wisdom. Sophia's hands tightened in her lap, but she said nothing. I have a daughter I did not know existed until 3 days ago, Damien continued. Her name is Aria, and she is my heir. Whether the law requires my wife's approval or not, I will not deny her, and I will not let politics decide who my child is allowed to be. He turned to Sophia. Our marriage was built on an agreement, not a bond. I think we both know that. I release you from it, and I will see to it that your kingdom's alliance with mine remains protected through proper treaty, not through a marriage that has cost us both more than either of us ever admits. Sophia's expression did not break, but something in her shoulders eased, as though a weight she had carried for years had finally been set down. She rose without a word and left the hall, and no one stopped her. Damien turned to Elena. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I don't expect that. But I am asking to be her father, in every way that matters, starting today. Elena studied him for a long moment. The court held its breath, waiting to see whether 5 years of pain would end in reconciliation or in another rejection, this time from her. You can be her father, Elena said at last. That's not a gift I'm giving you. It's her right, and you don't get to take it away again once you have it. But what you broke between us as mates isn't fixed because you gave a good speech in front of a room full of people who needed to hear it. She lifted her chin. I built a life without you, Damien. A good one. I'm not walking away from it just because you finally noticed what you lost. It was not the fairy tale ending the watching court had perhaps hoped for, but it was honest, and honesty was worth more than a performance of love neither of them was ready to promise. In the weeks that followed, Damien kept his word. He visited Aria often, learning the shape of her laughter, the particular way she scrunched her nose when she was thinking hard, the horses she loved to draw with far too many legs. Elena watched him carefully, guarding her heart the way she had learned to guard her pack, but she did not close the door entirely. Some walls take longer to come down than others, and she was in no hurry. One afternoon, as the three of them sat together in the palace garden, Aria looked up from her drawing and asked, quite simply, "Can we get ice cream, all three of us?" Elena glanced at Damien. He glanced back at her, something unspoken passing between them that was not quite forgiveness, and not quite the past either. It was something new, still uncertain, but no longer broken beyond repair. "All right," Elena said, taking her daughter's hand. "Ice cream." It was not a reunion. It was not a promise. It was simply a beginning. The first honest step. Two people who had once loved each other took toward whatever came next, together, for their daughter's sake, and perhaps, in time, for their own.